Hello, my dear sleepy soul. Tonight's begins with something quietly magical, not just rest, but a glimpse into of how ancient people searched for meaning in the shadows of the night. Prophets, oracles, dreamers under starlit skies, those who believed that sleep could unlock sacred doors. They listened for whispers, followed dreams, and dared to see what others could not. And what they saw still lingers. Ancient mysteries that drift through time, unanswered, but not forgotten. Before we drift into that world together, feel free to like this video and subscribe. But only if this kind of gentle bedtime storytelling brings you peace. And if you feel like sharing, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It warms my heart to see this quiet circle of dreamers stretch across the world. Now dim the lights, settle in, and let's begin our journey through ancient mysteries, forgotten rituals, and divine dreams in this calming sleep story whispered just for you. Before the world was drawn in ink and borders, before nations had names, before empires carved their marks into stone, there was Delphi. High upon the sacred slopes of Mount Parnassus, nestled between olive groves and windswept cliffs, a place was born not of men, but of myth. The Greeks called it the Omphalos, the navel of the world. Here, where they believed the sky met the earth, where gods walked as shadows and winds carried whispers, the most mysterious voice of the ancient world waited, hidden within stone and steam. This was no ordinary temple. It was Apollo's sanctuary, god of sunlight, of music, of healing, and of prophecy. And at the heart of it all sat a woman, not a queen, not a scholar, but a vessel. They called her the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi. She was no single person, but a lineage of women chosen for their purity, their calm, and their devotion. When the time came, she would descend into the inner chamber of the temple, a dark, sacred hollow beneath the floor. There, seated upon a golden tripod above a fissure in the earth, she waited for the voice of the god. The air around her was thick with laurel leaves, burning incense, and a strange, sweet-smelling gas that hissed up from deep underground. Some say it was ethylene gas seeping through the rocks. Others say it was the breath of Apollo himself. As the fumes surrounded her, she fell into a trance. Her body trembled, her eyes clouded over, and from her lips came murmurs, fragments of language, visions, not fully of this world. People came from every corner of the known world to hear her. Kings, priests, merchants, soldiers. They came not to see, but to ask, to place their questions, their most desperate, their most impossible, before the mouthpiece of a god. Will our crops survive the winter? Should I go to war? Will my child be born safely? Will the stars favor me or curse me? The Pythia never answered plainly. Her words were like smoke, shifting, twisting, never quite graspable. They were recorded by temple priests, carefully transcribed into poetic riddles. And in these riddles, empires rose or fell. Take Croesus, the wealthy king of Lydia. He asked the oracle if he should attack Persia. The answer came, if you cross the river, a great empire will fall. Croesus smiled. He believed the prophecy foretold his victory. He crossed the river, and it was his empire that fell. The oracle had spoken true. But truth in Delphi was never simple. Themistocles, a leader of Athens, once asked how to defend the city from a Persian invasion. The oracle warned of fire and ruin, but ended with a strange phrase, "The wooden wall shall not fail." What did it mean? Some thought it referred to a wooden palisade, but Themistocles believed it meant ships. So Athens built a navy, vast, sleek triremes of oak and bronze, and with them they turned the tide of war. The wooden wall did not fail. Even Alexander the Great came to Delphi. Eager to know his fate, he demanded a prophecy. But the Pythia, bound by sacred days, refused to speak. So he stormed into the temple himself, grabbing her by the arm, demanding answers. She looked up at him, startled, breathless, and said, "My son, you are unstoppable." That was all he needed. But not every answer brought glory. Some brought doom, some brought silence. And over the centuries, the world changed. New gods came, new empires rose, and the sacred breath beneath the temple slowly vanished. One day, the fissure fell quiet. The gas no longer hissed. The voice of Apollo was gone. But the stones still remember, and the laurel leaves still rustle. And when the mountain wind passes through the ruins, some say you can still hear her whisper. Not words, not language, just the feeling of something once divine, something that knew the future and spoke only in riddles. Around 1300 BCE, in the heart of the New Kingdom, Egyptian scribes wrote something peculiar onto fragile sheets of papyrus. Not hymns, not laws, but dreams and their meanings. What they created is one of the oldest dream manuals in human history, a strange and mesmerizing text now known as the Ramesside Dream Book, housed today in the British Museum. This scroll, written in cursive hieratic script, lists over 200 dreams and how to interpret them. Dream of climbing a palm tree? Good omen. Dream of your bed catching fire? That's trouble. Dream of eating crocodile flesh? Victory over your enemies. But why did dreams matter so much to the ancient Egyptians? Because to them, dreams were not personal. They were divine messages, communications from the gods, or from the spirits of the dead, slipping across the veil during sleep. The dreamer was not just resting. They were being visited. Egyptian society, from humble farmers to pharaohs themselves, believed that sleep was a sacred gateway. Each night, your Ba, your soul, left your body and wandered through other realms, and what it encountered became your dream. They even had a word for prophetic dreams, re-sweat, meaning awakening. But these were no ordinary awakenings. They were omens of what was to come. We know this from actual archaeological evidence. One of the most fascinating examples comes from Pharaoh Thutmose IV. On a hot day around 1400 BCE, the young prince rested in the shadow of the half-buried Great Sphinx near Giza. And there, he claimed, he fell into a deep sleep and dreamed that the Sphinx spoke. The message was simple and powerful. Clear the sand from my body, and you shall become king of Egypt. Thutmose obeyed. He excavated the Sphinx, and not long after he took the throne, even though he wasn't the first in line to inherit it. He later carved this dream into stone, known today as the dream stele of Thutmose IV, still standing between the Sphinx's paws. Was it political propaganda? Or did a dream truly change the course of Egyptian history? The Egyptians certainly thought so. We also know that entire temples were dedicated to dream incubation, sacred spaces where people came not to pray, but to sleep, to invite dreams that could heal them or reveal their futures. In the temple of Imhotep, god of medicine, pilgrims would undergo ritual purification, offer food or incense, and sleep on stone benches hoping for a vision, a whisper, a cure. If a dream revealed a snake wrapping around the leg, it might suggest poison. If a dream showed a lotus blooming in the hand, the illness would soon pass. The famous medical papyri of Egypt, such as the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus, often blend physical treatments with dream-based diagnosis. Medicine in ancient Egypt was inseparable from mysticism. And while we now decode dreams through psychology or neuroscience, the Egyptians used symbolic logic. They believed every element in a dream had meaning. A cat was not just a cat, it was Bastet. A river was not just a river, it was the path of Ra. One stunning papyrus from Deir el-Medina, the village of the royal tomb builders, lists local dreams experienced by workers, men dreaming of collapsing tomb walls, of blood-red rivers, of silent gods. The dreams were recorded and interpreted by temple priests. Even in the afterlife, dreams held power. Some tomb paintings depict the deceased sleeping beneath a tree, guarded by gods, waiting for dream visions in eternity. But perhaps the most haunting truth is this: many of these dream scrolls were destroyed or lost. Only fragments remain, tattered, brittle, their edges flaked by time. Each one is a sliver of someone's night, thousands of years ago. So as you drift into sleep tonight, imagine lying on a cool stone floor under a painted ceiling of stars. You've offered sweet incense to Thoth, the god of wisdom. You close your eyes and wait for the dream, not a fantasy, not nonsense, but a message. Just like the ancients did, listening to the night for answers written in symbols on scrolls of silence. There is a moment in Roman history where the fate of an entire empire may have turned on a scroll of prophecy, not one written by a general or a politician, but by a woman no one fully understood. Her name was never recorded. She is remembered only as the Sibyl. The story begins long before Rome's golden age, in the shadowy days of its early kings. Legend says that during the reign of Tarquinius Superbus, the last of the Roman monarchs, an old woman arrived at the royal court with 9 scrolls. They were written in a language no one recognized. Heavy, cryptic verses inked with symbols and mystery. She told the king, "These are the prophecies of Rome's future." She asked for a high price. Tarquinius refused. So she burned 3 of the scrolls and returned with 6. He still refused. She burned 3 more. When only 3 remained, he relented, paying the original price for 1/3 of what he could have had in full. What were on those scrolls? To this day, no one knows exactly, but Rome treated them as sacred. They became known as the Sibylline books, and were kept under the strictest protection, locked in the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, on the Capitoline Hill. Only the Quindecimviri, a special priestly college of 15 men, were permitted to read them, and only during times of great crisis, when natural disasters struck, when crops failed, when omens frightened the public, the Senate would summon the priests. The scrolls were consulted during the Second Punic War, when Hannibal crossed the Alps. According to Livy, Rome was so shaken by dark omens, statues sweating blood, lightning striking temples, that they turned to the Sibylline verses for guidance. The result: a mysterious ritual was ordered. 2 Greeks and 2 Gauls were buried alive beneath the Forum Boreum, a rare and disturbing act meant to appease the gods. Later, during the civil wars that followed Julius Caesar's assassination, the Sibylline books were consulted again. And under Augustus, Rome conducted the secular games, said to have been predicted and timed by the Sibyl's words. These were not casual documents. They were state secrets. But what exactly did they say? Unfortunately, the original scrolls were destroyed. A great fire in 83 BCE consumed the Temple of Jupiter. The Sibylline books were lost in the flames. Desperate to recover what had been lost, Roman officials sent envoys across the Mediterranean to Delphi, Erythrae, and other ancient oracle sites, collecting every fragment, every verse they could find. The reconstructed collection was stored in the Temple of Apollo on the Palatine Hill, under the watchful eye of Augustus himself. But centuries later, around 405 AD, the Christian emperor Stilicho ordered them destroyed, fearing they were too pagan, too dangerous. And just like that, Rome's most guarded oracle disappeared forever. Today we only have second-hand references, quotes in Livy, Virgil, and Cicero, hints, glimpses, enough to know that these verses held immense power, and that Rome, the most rational, organized, empire-building civilization, turned to mystery, to myth, to the riddles of a vanished woman, when nothing else could explain what was coming. So as you drift deeper now, let your mind imagine it: a candlelit chamber, golden scrolls with words that tremble on the edge of meaning, the silence of a city listening for prophecy. The stone tablets and the road of fire in the arid mesas of the American Southwest, where red rocks rise like ancient monuments and the wind speaks in the silence between stars, there lives a people whose stories stretch further back than memory. They are the Hopi, the peaceful ones, and among their oldest teachings are prophecies, passed down through oral tradition, from grandfather to grandson, from elder to clan. These visions were never meant to be written. They were to be spoken, felt, lived. But some were carved into stone. One such tablet, held only by Hopi elders, is said to show the fate of the world, not in words, but in symbols: a straight line, a jagged path, figures standing and falling. It tells, they say, of 3 great shakings, 3 world-changing events. The first, a time when white-skinned people came across the great water. The second, a time of massive war, fire in the skies and across the seas. The third has not yet come, and according to the elders, we are living in the shadow of that third prophecy now. But let us go back. The Hopi do not see time as we do, not a straight road, but a circle. What was will be again, and the world, they believe, has already been created and destroyed 4 times. We now live in the 4th world, the world of choice, of balance and test. And according to prophecy, if we lose that balance, a 5th world will be born, but only after great upheaval. Elders like Thomas Banyasya, a respected Hopi speaker, shared these messages with the outside world in the 20th century, believing the time had come. He described a vision of the gourd of ashes, a strange term the Hopi used long before modern warfare. Some believe this referred to the mushroom cloud of the atomic bomb. They said the earth would shake, that rivers would run red, that man would build a spider's web around the world, that stone roads would crisscross the land, and a blue star would appear in the sky. Some say the spider's web became the internet. Others believe the blue star is still to come, a cosmic event that will mark a time of decision. But the most haunting prophecy is not dramatic. It is soft. It says, when the eagle lands on the moon, the end is near. In 1969, when Apollo 11 touched down and the Eagle spacecraft landed, some Hopi elders reportedly turned away. They had seen enough. But these are not prophecies of doom. Not entirely. Hopi wisdom is always about balance. There is always a choice between the fast road of greed and destruction and the slow path of peace and respect for the earth. In one version of the prophecy stone, the line splits. One line goes up, erratic, sharp, ending in collapse. The other continues straight, steady, connected to the ground. The Hopi say, those who walk in harmony with nature, with gratitude and simplicity, will survive whatever is to come, not through escape, but through alignment. In recent decades, many non-Hopi writers and speakers have embellished or misunderstood these teachings. But among traditional Hopi, the core remains clear, that we are not separate from the earth, that we are stewards of cycles far older than cities or borders, and that, even in silence, the stones remember. So tonight, as you lie in the stillness of your room, imagine a desert wind moving over the mesas, a night sky without lights, and a circle of elders passing stories from mouth to ear, not to frighten, but to awaken. Prophecies, yes, but perhaps also gentle warnings, soft reminders that even now we are being given a choice. The calendar that counted down to silence. Deep in the rainforests of southern Mexico and Guatemala, beneath vines and jungle mist, lie the ruins of one of the most mathematically brilliant civilizations the world has ever known, the Maya. Stone pyramids rise from the forest like forgotten memories. Their walls are covered in glyphs, swirling complex symbols that tell of gods, battles, kings, and time. Time was everything to the Maya, but not as we know it, not merely clocks or dates. To the Maya, time was a divine rhythm. It had cycles, layers, prophecies. The universe was like a great wheel, always turning. And at the heart of this understanding was their astonishing creation, the long count calendar. Unlike the Gregorian calendar we use today, The long count could track thousands of years into the past and forward into the unknown. It did not end at December 31st. It ended at a moment of cosmic alignment. And that moment was December 21st, 2012. That single date sparked a wave of global fascination. Books, documentaries, and websites all whispered the same question. Did the Maya predict the end of the world? Let's untangle the mystery. The date we now call 2012 marked the end of a 5,125-year cycle, which began in 3,114 BCE, a time that, to the Maya, marked the birth of the current world. They believed that worlds rose and fell in repeating ages. We are in the fourth world, and when a cycle ends, the next begins. But nowhere, not in surviving codices, not in temple inscriptions, does it say the world would be destroyed. It was not an end, it was a reset. One of the most famous inscriptions comes from the Tortuguero Monument 6 in modern-day Tabasco, Mexico. It mentions the date 13.00000, the end of the cycle, and references the return of the god Bolon-Yokte-Ku, a mysterious deity associated with change and transformation. It's not a prophecy of fire or flood. It's a passing of the torch. But that didn't stop modern interpretations. For years leading up to 2012, people spoke of planetary alignment, solar storms, black holes. Some believed ancient seers had seen something we had not, that the stars would shift, that time itself would pause. Yet when the date arrived, nothing burned. The sun rose, and the world went on. But something curious did happen. Thousands of people across cultures turned inward. They began asking questions about the future, the planet, and humanity's path forward. Maybe that was the point all along. The Maya did not just measure time, they lived it. They built observatories, aligning their temples with the solstices and equinoxes. They predicted eclipses with astonishing accuracy, using only the stars and their own minds. Some researchers believe their calendar was more accurate over long periods than our own. They believed each cycle of time brought specific energies, some for war, some for peace, some for planting, others for dreaming. Their seers, called Aj-Kaj, were trained in astrology, ritual, and the sacred meanings of numbers. They used calendars like Tzolk'in and Hab to divine the best days for healing, for speaking, for journeying between worlds. And though many of their books were burned by Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century, 3 of their sacred codices survived, each filled with star maps, planetary cycles, and predictions. We may never fully understand what the Maya knew, but we do know this: they did not fear the end. They prepared for it as a beginning. So as your thoughts soften and you drift deeper into your own cycle of rest, remember the wisdom of the Maya. That time is not running out. It is always returning. That change is not an ending, but an invitation. Visions in fire and moonlight. Long ago, in the golden age of Babylon, where ziggurats climbed toward the stars and gods were carved in stone, a foreign prisoner had a dream. His name was Daniel, and his dream would echo for thousands of years. The Book of Daniel, found in the Hebrew Bible and later adopted into Christian and Islamic traditions, is unlike any other in Scripture. It is not just history, it is prophecy. And within its pages lie some of the most cryptic, apocalyptic visions ever recorded. But Daniel did not write from a throne or a temple. He was a captive, taken from Jerusalem during the Babylonian conquest in the 6th century BCE and brought to serve in the court of King Nebuchadnezzar II. There, under the shadow of Babylon's gleaming walls, Daniel became known not just as a wise man, but as an interpreter of dreams. One night, the king himself was troubled. He had seen a vision so vivid, so strange, that it left him sleepless. He demanded his wise men explain the dream, but none could, until Daniel stepped forward. He described the king's dream before hearing it: a great statue with a head of gold, chest of silver, thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of clay. And then a stone, uncut by human hands, struck the feet. The statue crumbled. The stone grew into a mountain and filled the whole earth. Daniel explained, the statue represented a sequence of empires. Babylon was the golden head, but others would follow, each weaker than the last. And in the end, a divine kingdom would rise, not made by human hands, and last forever. Some believe this prophecy predicted the fall of Babylon, the rise of Persia, Greece, Rome, and the coming of a messianic age. Others see it as a warning about the fragility of human power. But this was only the beginning. Later in the text, Daniel receives visions of his own. 4 great beasts rising from a churning sea, a lion with eagle's wings, a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, a leopard with 4 wings, and a 4th, monstrous creature with iron teeth. Each beast, he is told, represents a kingdom. Each will fall, each will be judged. And then comes the most haunting image of all, the Ancient of Days, a divine figure, seated on a throne of fire, surrounded by a river of flame. Books are opened, judgment begins. These apocalyptic visions were unlike anything found in the earlier Hebrew scriptures, and they would influence centuries of prophecy, including parts of the book of Revelation in the Christian Bible. But Daniel's visions were not born in a vacuum. They reflected something far older, something deeply Babylonian. You see, Babylon itself was a city obsessed with prophecy. Their scholars, called Baru, practiced celestial divination, watching the skies for signs. They recorded eclipses, planetary alignments, and strange events on clay tablets now known as the Enuma, Anu, Enlil, one of the oldest collections of omens in the world. One tablet might say, if Jupiter is bright in the east, a great king will fall. Or, if the moon is darkened on the 14th day, the harvest will fail. They believed the gods spoke through the heavens, and Daniel, educated in this world, understood the language of stars and symbols. Even today, scholars debate which of Daniel's prophecies were meant as future visions, and which were veiled commentary on events of his time. Was the Book of Daniel written during the 6th century BCE, or later, during the Seleucid rule in the 2nd century, when Jewish communities were persecuted by Antiochus IV? Was the prophecy of the abomination of desolation a warning about real temple desecration, or a cosmic foretelling? We may never know for certain, but what remains is the feeling of standing at the edge of time, watching kingdoms rise like statues of gold and iron, and hearing the faint whisper of judgment in the winds. So rest now. Imagine the night sky over Babylon, filled with stars that once guided dreams and decrees, a flame flickering beside a clay tablet, and a prisoner who dreamed not of freedom, but of empires, falling like sand. The man who wrote the future in riddles. In the year 1555, during the chill of a late French spring, a physician by the name of Michel de Nostradamus sat at his desk by candlelight and published a small book of strange rhyming verses. He called them quatrains, 4-line riddles written in a swirling mix of Old French, Latin, Greek, and pure code. The book would be titled Les Prophéties, and with it, Nostradamus became a legend. Who was he? And what exactly did he see? Born in 1503 in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, France, Michel de Nostradamus grew up during a time of plagues, wars, and religious upheaval. He studied medicine in Montpellier and quickly earned respect for treating victims of the bubonic plague, not with magic, but with forward-thinking hygiene, clean air, and herbal remedies. But Michel was not just a man of science. He was deeply fascinated by astrology, classical texts, and the occult sciences. He claimed to spend nights in trance, staring into a bowl of water or a brass mirror, receiving visions of what was to come. By the time he was in his 50s, Nostradamus began writing his visions down, hundreds of them, in short, poetic fragments. He avoided dates, he avoided specifics, but he layered each quatrain with imagery so strange, so compelling, that readers felt something behind the words. Some of his most famous predictions seem eerily accurate. One quatrain reads, "The young lion shall overcome the old in single combat in a cage of gold. His eyes pierced through a golden cage. 2 wounds become 1. Then he dies a cruel death." Just a few years after it was published, the young Gabriel, Count of Montgomery, accidentally killed King Henry II of France in a jousting match. A wooden lance shattered, pierced through the king's golden helmet, and splinters drove into his eye and skull. He died days later. The French court was shaken. The verse matched too closely. Another quatrain appears to hint at the Great Fire of London in 1666. "The blood of the just will be demanded of London, burnt by fire in the year 66. Did he predict the massive fire that destroyed the city? Or was it coincidence? There are quatrains interpreted as foretelling the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, the reign of Adolf Hitler, even the September 11th attacks, but none of them mention these figures by name. Instead, Nostradamus used ciphers, hyster for Hitler, possibly drawn from an old name for the Danube River. Pau, Ney, Laron, 3 towns in France rearranged to hint at Napoleon. Historians are divided. Some say his verses are too vague, too open to interpretation. That meaning is forced in after events occur. Others believe he used deliberate misdirection to avoid censorship or execution by the Inquisition. And indeed, Nostradamus lived in a dangerous time. Religious wars swept across Europe. The Black Death stalked cities. Astrologers were sometimes seen as heretics. Yet Nostradamus gained patrons, including Catherine de' Medici, the powerful Queen of France. She believed his prophecies could protect her family. In 1566, shortly before his death, Nostradamus is said to have told his secretary, "You will not find me alive at sunrise." And by dawn, he was gone. His tomb was later disturbed during the French Revolution, and according to legend, the year of the disturbance was inscribed inside the coffin, as if he'd foreseen it. But perhaps the most haunting truth is this: he never claimed to predict the future with certainty. In his own words, he wrote, "Events cannot be absolutely determined beforehand, for the whole thing is governed and ruled by the power of God." He saw possibilities, echoes, patterns, and in those riddles, people have always found something. So as your eyes grow heavier, imagine him at his candlelit desk, pen scratching softly against parchment, not writing for fame, not even for warning, just recording what he saw when the veil between time and sleep grew thin. The sky watchers who whispered to kings, long before Babylon, before Greece, before Rome, there was Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, where cities first rose from mud and stone and writing first touched clay. Here, in what is now Iraq, a civilization emerged more than 5,000 years ago, and with it came the world's first recorded prophecies. But these were not visions written in dream journals or hidden scrolls. They were etched into tablets, baked in fire, and archived in temple libraries. These ancient prophets were not called prophets. They were Baru priests, ritual specialists, trained in the art of divination. They did not predict the future from emotion or inspiration. They read it in the sky. From the top of ziggurats, stepped temples reaching for the stars, they watched Venus, Jupiter, eclipses, comets, and they wrote everything down. One of the greatest discoveries in archaeology is a massive set of tablets known as the Enuma Anu Enlil. Over 70 cuneiform tablets, some dating back to 1100 BCE, which catalog hundreds of celestial omens. Here are just a few. If the moon disappears on the 14th day, the king will die. If Mars stands in the east, enemies will approach. If an eclipse occurs and the sun is covered, rebellion shall rise in the land. Each omen was based on centuries of observation, not superstition but patterns. These priests built one of the world's first observatories, using shadow sticks and water clocks to track the heavens. They believed the gods communicated through signs, and that by learning to read those signs, humans could act in harmony with fate or protect themselves from it. But it wasn't just the sky. Mesopotamian seers read the livers of sacrificed animals, especially sheep. This was called extispicy. A clay model of a liver would be laid out, and each bump, each mark, was a message. One side ruled by the god Shamash, the other by Adad. If the gallbladder was twisted, an enemy would arrive. If a certain groove was missing, the king would fall. To modern minds, it seems strange, but to the Mesopotamians, this was divine science. Their predictions were taken so seriously that when a bad omen threatened a king's reign, the ruler would temporarily step down, replaced by a substitute king, a commoner dressed in royal robes who ruled for a few days and was then quietly removed. In doing so, They believed the gods' anger would fall on the decoy, sparing the true king. A chilling ritual meant to rewrite fate. But there were also those said to be chosen by the gods directly. Clay tablets from the ancient city of Mari on the Euphrates River describe women and men falling into ecstatic trances during temple ceremonies. One priestess cried out, "I am the mouth of Ishtar, listen to me." These prophets, called Muhu and Muhatu, delivered divine messages, often during political crisis. They were respected, even feared. Kings would pause wars based on their words, and yet over time the voices faded, libraries collapsed, empires fell, and many of these prophecies were buried beneath layers of dust and silence. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that archaeologists uncovered these tablets and slowly, patiently, began to read prophecy again. Today, these clay voices live in museums in London, Berlin, Baghdad, soft lines pressed by reed styluses over 3 millennia ago, still legible. So as you fall deeper now into the soft dark of your own dreams, imagine the stillness of a ziggurat before dawn, a sky filled with stars no city has touched, and a priest in a long robe staring upward, reading the sky like a letter from the gods. And just maybe, he saw us there. When the stars were maps of fate, look up, dear listener, and imagine the sky with no lights, no cities, no planes or towers, only stars. That was the sky our ancestors knew, and they believed it was speaking. For thousands of years, people across the ancient world looked upward, not just for beauty or wonder, but for answers. In Babylon, Egypt, India, Greece, and China, the night sky was a living manuscript, a tapestry of lights woven by gods and ancestors, filled with patterns, warnings, blessings. This wasn't astronomy yet. It was something older. It was astrology. The Babylonians were among the first to map the heavens systematically. By 1800 BCE, they had already divided the sky into constellations, tracked planetary movements, and began assigning meanings to them. They noticed that when Mars burned red in the east, war often followed. When Venus rose as the morning star, peace and fertility were near. From these patterns, they created the zodiac, a 12-part path through which the sun moved. Each section was linked to a constellation, a deity, a fate. This idea traveled to Persia, to Greece, and to the world. In Hellenistic Egypt, astrology blossomed. The city of Alexandria, with its libraries and scholars, became a center for celestial wisdom. There, astrologers began casting personal horoscopes, not just for kings, but for individuals. They would note the hour, date, and place of your birth, and draw a chart, a cosmic snapshot of the heavens at that moment. From this, they believed your character could be read, your destiny hinted at, your challenges seen. This practice, called natal astrology, combined mathematics, philosophy, and myth. The famous Roman Emperor Augustus had his horoscope inscribed on coins, using the stars as a seal of legitimacy. And the Stoic philosopher Marcus Manilius wrote in the 1st century, "He who knows the stars will never be surprised by fate." But the fascination wasn't limited to the Mediterranean. In India, The tradition of Jyotisha, Vedic astrology, grew alongside mathematics and astronomy. It focused on planetary periods, karmic cycles, and the soul's journey across lifetimes. In China, imperial astrologers tracked the movement of Jupiter across a 60-year cycle. They used eclipses to interpret the fate of dynasties. A sudden darkness at midday was never just nature, it was a message. Even in Mesoamerica, the Maya tracked Venus with incredible precision, timing wars, ceremonies, and coronations to its shimmering arc across the sky. To them, the planets were not distant. They were gods in motion. And across all these cultures, a shared idea emerged that the macrocosm, the universe, and the microcosm, the human soul, were reflections of one another, that we were not separate from the stars. We were the stars, in temporary form. Today, astrology is often dismissed as superstition, but its roots lie in deep observation and a desire to understand our place in the great unfolding of time. So as you drift now, deeper into quiet, let the stars return to your sky. No predictions, no pressure, just the calm thought that you too are part of the cosmos, a moment in a pattern, a light, briefly glowing. And now, dear soul, the journey draws to a close. We have walked through temples lost to time, listened to dreams whispered in papyrus and stone, and wandered beneath skies once thought divine. From Delphi's trembling oracle to Egypt's dreaming priests, from Mayan star watchers and Babylon's clay tablets, to the quiet breath of a Hopi elder and the flickering candlelight of Nostradamus's desk. Each one listened to dreams, to stars, to silence. And though the world has changed, though the names of gods have shifted, and the empires are dust, the questions remain. What is coming? What does it mean? Are we part of something written in the stars, or something we write as we go? There are no final answers, only echoes. Echoes of voices who tried to see what lay ahead, not to control it, but to understand it, to soften the unknown. So now, in your own quiet way, you've joined them, a dreamer watching time pass gently, one breath at a time. You don't need to know the future. You only need to rest and let the night carry you. You are safe. You are stardust. You are a story being written in peace. Sleep now under the same sky they once watched. Sleep and dream softly.